Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. We're back for part two of the discussion of the offense against the Seattle Seahawks. Obviously, a very happy discussion. If you missed part one, why? Go back and download it. Come on. There's all kinds of great stuff in there. We're talking to Jeremy Kahn, all kinds of great futures betting strategies. We talked about the Ravens -6 versus the Browns and which side of that he'd be on. The wisdom of a bet on Roquan or Geno Stone at 100-1. And talked a little bit about Devoa and whether or not the Ravens are at a good price to win the Super Bowl right now relative to Devoa. Devoa would say they have a lot better chance. And listen to Jeremy and what he has to say on this, because there's some very interesting stuff. Talked a little bit about Lamar Jackson's performance, and I know everybody wants to hear about that. And, a good game again for Lamar, one maybe where he didn't maximize his opportunity set. And, of course, we talked a lot about Mr. Mitchell. And we'll talk about Keaton some more in part two, I'm sure. But, Jeremy, great to have you back.
Yeah, man, good to be back. And I know I wanted to get in the offensive line with you because this is where I get to kind of pepper some questions at you and find out what actually went on Sunday with the offensive line. And let me start this off with you with Ronnie Stanley, okay? Because this is a guy that we've talked about quite a bit and how important he is to the offense. What was it? Only responsible for one of the 4 sacks the offensive line was this past weekend.
That's actually a week old. I'm sorry. That note is a week old. They had 1 sack, and he was responsible for it, though. Yeah.
That was a week. Okay, so let me talk about the strip sack. Was that Stanley's fault when that went down? And some of the missed blocks that he had. Kind of let me know what you were seeing there with him.
Okay, so Boye Mafe is a handful, a draft pick just out of this year, and exciting young player that Seattle got. He had the strip sack. It was his own. Stanley's actually only negative play of the day, which is good. But he did get run out of 2 other pressures. So he got beaten by Mafe another time where Lamar evaded the pocket and ran for positive yardage, which was great. And Mafe was chasing him most of that way, which was really fun to see, by the way. And he ran out of another pressure for I think it was a smaller gain, 5-6 yards that was also positive. Those kind of plays, he gets a 0 score as opposed to a negative score for it, but he does get docked pretty significantly in terms of a subjective adjustment that I add later, where the system is not capturing every negative point should be applied. 6 missed blocks. Every single one of those was a loss at the line of scrimmage. Now, losses at the line of scrimmage are really severe. That means the guy opposite you is beating you some way on the block you're trying to make. Losses that are not at the line of scrimmage fall into several categories. You can miss on a pull. That's not great, but it's not necessarily terrible. You could more often miss going into level 2. So you look around for a block, there's not one to be had, or you can't quite reach somebody. That's not as bad a situation as missing at the line of scrimmage. So 6 out of 6 losses at the line of scrimmage is bad. Overall deductions are not too bad. He had 4 blocks in level 2, went 4 of 4 on his pulls, which is nice. And the Ravens still have the tackle pull a fair amount of the way they run their offense. 2 pancakes. This is the really big number that I still gave him a little bit of his bonus on this for, was 5 highlight blocks, which is the high for a Ravens player this season, ties the high. An outstanding total. A lot of savvy blocks where he's blocking 2 guys. As a tackle, he doesn't get as many combination blocks as you see from an interior lineman. Those often make a high percentage of the highlights for interior linemen. But in his case, it's a lot of blocking 2 people, sometimes on pass plays, some side on the backside of a run play. So very effective doing that this game. B- overall. I thought a solid grade. He's had some very poor scoring games recently, particularly with penalties and some other pressure events due to slippage against the Cardinals, where there were more qualitative positives in the game than there were scoring positives. This game, he actually got a good score, and it's a good grade, and it's nice to see that. Nice to see him put that together in one game.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about, so going back over, just looking at him, how have you felt about Ronnie Stanley through half of this season? There are some people that still believe he's playing hurt, not at 100%, but, as you talked about, some of his games haven't been scored as well. Does he look like the left tackle that we've talked about for the Ravens for years, or does he need to get better?
Well, I think it would be ideal if he played at a higher level. He can't play at the current level and be more than a 2024 bubble guy, probably, honestly. He's got about an $8 million savings for cutting him next year. Money's going to be tight. The big barrier that probably keeps him here is the fact that it's very expensive to get a left tackle, whether you go out and find one on the open market or whether you go and find one in terms of draft capital. So I don't think they'll do that. I think what could happen if he does not finish the year strong here, they probably go and look for a late first, second round, or even a third round tackle who's a better developmental bet than, say, a Fa'alele was in the fourth round. And honestly, I think we're at a point where with Fa'alele, we can say almost with certainty that he's not going to be a left tackle in the NFL. If could he develop into being a right tackle? I think that's still possible. Could he develop into being a guard? Still possible, but it's going to take a lot to replace Ronnie Stanley when the time comes.
One of the surprises coming into the season for some was Simpson. Your thoughts on how he looked yesterday in a game against Seattle that they dominated, or Sunday, excuse me.
Yeah. So, another solid but unspectacular game from Simpson. He avoided penalties, which is that's his big demon. He had a bunch of penalties coming here, and he had a bunch of penalties early in this season. But he's had several games in a row now of not having a penalty. And I'm forgetting whether it's 3 or 4 consecutive games. I'm going to look it up real quick here. Of course, I bring up the 2022 spreadsheet, and it never fails, does it? So Simpson has had no penalties since week 5 at Pittsburgh. So that's 4 straight games without a penalty. He had 35 yards in penalties in that first 5 weeks, which is not good. But that's good. I mean, he's hopefully getting it turned around here. He allowed 1.5 penetrations as a run blocker. That's when he contributes to a run for loss. So that's not ideal. It's not a great run blocking game, but he only had half a pressure that he shared when he got pancaked by Leonard Williams. Leonard Williams gives a lot of people trouble. Obviously, very big interior lineman, and just picked up by the Seahawks this week. Simpson has a lot of troubles with balance, as I think we've talked about on air at 105.7 before, in terms of maintaining his feet, and he ends up on the ground a lot more than any other Ravens lineman at this point. So that's been an ongoing problem.
Well, the one that I was really excited to talk about was Linderbaum. So we all know about. Oh, good. You went.
I had a little more on Simpson.
Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't want to move it too quick. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're doing good. He had 10 missed blocks for Simpson. This game is a lot. 5 of those were losses at the line of scrimmage. The lower percentage of that, the better. He is obviously pulling a lot, which are going to be some of those losses because he's only 4 to 7 on his pulls. Did have 7 blocks in level 2, 0 pancakes, 3 highlight combination blocks. So that's something at least to pull forward for. A C overall. So again, solid but not spectacular. Honestly, at this point, I think if they got that level of play out of Simpson for the rest of the year, they'd probably be pretty happy with it. He's a free agent at the end of the year. He might even be a guy the Ravens can retain because I don't think he's going to be expensive. If he develops, he will be. But if he doesn't go anywhere from where he is now, if he stayed at this level, I think he's very re-signable. So,
Ken, just going back to the missed block. So when you're grading those, is that easier to grade than, say, like a drop pass? Because you get what I'm saying? There's some gray area as far as is it catchable, is it not? Are missed blocks easier to tell just by looking at it? Is it, hey, that's who you're supposed to have, he got by you? Or how do you look at those things?
Okay, so you've hit on a couple topics here. One is assignment, which can be one of the harder things to do. But there are people who tell you can't possibly do it because you don't know the assignment. Well, there's only a questionable assignment on maybe 1 or 2 blocks per game per player at most. Usually not even that.
Yeah.
Usually what they're supposed to do is very clear from their own actions. And it's when somebody busts through a gap where there's players on either side who might have been responsible for picking up a stunter or a blitzer, that's where a nuance comes into it. But it's really not as complex as people would have you.
Yeah.
And in particular, I find that players are particularly hoity-toity elitist in terms of their view that they're the only ones who can understand the nuance of who's supposed to block who or what the assignments are. And it's an elite fraternity and you're not part of it. It's crap. I mean,
I hate when they get in that. Yeah.
I have scored 100,000 run blocks over the last 20 years. I can tell you it's not as complicated as you have to do. But the only thing they have to do that's right on the border in terms of judgment, I don't even leave to judgment. I will literally time out plays to accurate to 0.03 seconds to determine if ample time and space occurs because it's 90 clicks on a 30 frame per second 1080i broadcast. Mm-hmm. That you go through. So it's all that information is available to people. It's really not as complex as all that. And are there occasionally judgment on a missed block? Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
there are questions, but how often is it really a question? If we sat down and we scored a game together, I doubt that we disagree on any more than 2 blocks per player, and it doesn't mean that we be in any particular direction, plus or minus.
Yeah, I mean, these are unbiased reviews for you. I mean, you're not like, it's not a matter of saying, oh, I'm not going to give him that one because I gave him one last week or what. It's an unbiased view on it, so I think it's pretty interesting. All right, now I said I wanted to get to Linderbaum because you mentioned highlight blocks, and I know for a fact that if it doesn't rank as a highlight block, I don't know what a highlight block is.
That's right.
But I talked about that play on the Mitchell run where there's no other way to put it. He put the women and children to bed and went hunting for supper. And then after he got some, he said, I'm still a little hungry. And he went looking for someone else, which is what you want. The only thing that could have made it better is if I remember what George Kittle and Quentin Nelson of the Colts, when they were screaming while they were blocking people and somebody's mic picked it up. That sounded frightening, but that was an incredible play. How did Linderbaum look to you overall?
Let's start with the highlight because it was one of the cool plays of the season by any Ravens offensive lineman. So he got way out in front of the Mitchell run. Mitchell took a little bit of time to break tackles behind him, which was nice. That made it extra opportunity for him to get down. And he goes down and he absolutely annihilates Jordan Brooks, number 56, who's the guy who was drafted immediately before Patrick Queen.
Yeah, he was linked to the Ravens out of Texas Tech, right? Yeah. So
was he at Texas Tech? I'm trying to remember.
I think it was at Texas Tech.
I think you're probably right.
Yeah.
But anyway, he knocked him what seemed like into next week, and somehow Jordan Brooks stumbles, keeps his feet. We'd already written it down as a pancake, and I go, wait a minute, he didn't pancake him. Jordan Brooks gets up, runs down the sideline. Linderbaum finds him a second time, and he pancaked him that time for sure. So it was a very cool play to definitely put him to sleep on that one. And It's also a case where you can't judge a player by the 450-foot home run he had. You have a lot of at-bats as an offensive lineman. And Linderbaum had a lot in this game. And it was not perfect. He was generally pretty good. And, I think he's certainly grown tremendously as a pass blocker this year. This wasn't one of his great pass block games. He had 2.5 pressures he allowed as I saw it. I'm a little different from PFF. I have a tougher standard, in particular for keeping people out of the cone. And it has to be done for 3 seconds. Well, the play immediately before the touchdown pass to Beckham is a great example where I scored as a pressure. I'm sure PFF did not, where he was backing into Huntley. Huntley has to short arm the throw. It wasn't going to be complete anyway. He should have thrown it basically through the goalpost to make sure that ball wasn't going to be intercepted. But it was a case where Linderbaum got a pressure by my system. So he had one shared penetration on a pole. He had only 3 missed blocks, which is good, and one of those was a loss of the line of scrimmage. He also came out of the game early. So they wanted to put Sam Mustipher in for 9 snaps. That cut into his grade a little bit because that last drive was a really easy grading drive, a lot of run plays, tired Seattle defense, nobody really looking to penetrate. Would have been a great opportunity for him to pick up a 9 for 9, but he lost out on that. So 2 level 2 blocks, 2 out of 4 on poles, 2 pancakes. The incredible highlight on the Mitchell thing, which is in itself worth a little bit of a subjective adjustment there. C+ for the game. And again, there's people who have said since he was drafted, I've been beating on Linderbaum. I think he's made a tremendous progression this year. This is really important, by the way. PFF, by their own admission now, and I talked to their R&D head on a show that's out there from Monday, posted Monday on pass blocking expectation. It's with Timo Riska, who's the head of R&D at PFF. And he talks about, basically how much players get. He's got a and the formula is not the right word, a model for looking at blocks relative to expectation. And Tyler Linderbaum was near the bottom last year, and he's at the top this year, second or third among centers this year in terms of that. That transformation is the biggest of just about any Ravens player. And I'm including Brandon Stevens in there, who's probably the other really big one. I'm trying to think if there's another player who's taken a big step forward. But Linderbaum really did not have a very good rookie season because his pass blocking was so bad. But the way PFF puts together their numbers, they enormously overweight run blocking for a center. And that led people to believe that his overall grade for PFF was really reflective of what a good season he had. What Timo told me, basically on Monday was you're really better off looking at the separated run and pass blocking grades. And PFF is going to change their system next year
Oh,
to
wow.
more accurate, effective. I've already been telling people that for years, about the way, saying, the pass and run blocking games are meaningful in of themselves, but they don't do a good job of combining those.
See, Ken, I use PFF every week, and I'm a subscriber over there. As far as I like a lot of the fantasy stuff for daily fantasy. I use it for gambling, although I don't use their picks for gambling. But I do like looking at some of the matchups. I think there's an inherent value in looking at quarterback wide receiver matchups and different adjusted things that they have on there, weighted plays that you could look at, that this should be a game that we see more plays. Because for me, pace of play is so important in games. And then also, right? Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a big totals guy where I'm looking for it. So something that I just keep an eye on. And I think PFF does a great job, and Timo is fantastic. So just kind of a cool note to know that they're going to switch that up for next year. You want to move on?
We can, sure.
No, just go ahead. You had something else?
No.
Right.
C+ for Linderbaum.
Got it. Kevin Zeitler, talking about his games, had a couple of good games the past 5, right? So does he look like he's completely back right now?
Yeah, I mean, he started off the season not looking like Kevin Zeitler, that's for sure. And for the last 5 games, he's looked terrific. It's interesting. In one of those games, he had a lot of – I scored him with a fair number of pressures, 3.5, and he had 0 by PFF. So it's a lot of invasion of the cone, definitional differences. We went through this. By the way, I love PFF's product. Not only that, I really like their people, and they always respond well. So if I say, hey, here are the pressures I have scored, they give me a response to that that's very thorough in terms of why they didn't do it that way. So I really appreciate that, always have with them, and I had a great relationship with them over the years. But Zeitler, false start, his only negative event for the game. He did miss 6 blocks, but only one of those was a loss at the line of scrimmage. He had a lot of L2 NBs, which means moves to level 2 and doesn't make a block. It's just notation on our sheet. He missed 2 pulls in the game, so that was where he picked up a couple as well. 5 blocks in level 2, 0 pancakes, 3 highlight combination blocks. Interior linemen, that's where they pick up a lot of their combinations. A lot of their highlights, and Zeitler had a great game there as well. A after adjustment for Zeitler, right at the bottom of the A range, but still terrific. And this is now 4 to 5 excellent games.
Anything else on Zeitler in the play that we've seen from the right side?
I'm very happy with where he's back to right now. It's very wordy early in the year because he's the North Star for this offensive line. He's the guy who's got to do it. And, he's probably now taken over as the best offensive lineman for the year so far, although Linderbaum was probably the guy right, before this game. Now, Zeitler had an A, Linderbaum was C+. It's probably switched, but Zeitler, Zeitler playing well is absolutely essential for this line.
Let's talk about Macari, because when you look at his play, Moses, the injury, you look at no penalties, no negative events that you had listed for him. He does seem like he's such an important piece to this team, and it feels weird. Anytime somebody gets hurt, you're like, please come in and help us. But he's multifaceted. He can do so many different things for that offensive line.
Yeah, versatility is outstanding. And honestly, at left tackle, he's kind of an adequate minus guy. He deals with a lot of shortcomings over there. He has some difficulty because pass blocking is just it's difficult, and he's challenged in terms of length. He's challenged in terms of his size as well. But he's outstanding in this game. He filled in for Moses, who had been playing pretty well, and he delivered the first A+ of any Ravens lineman for the entire year. Let me tell you how that broke down. He did not have any negative event, and you mentioned that. He had 2 missed blocks the entire game. Both of those were losses in level 2. Moved to level 2, didn't make a block. No problem on that. That's a really minor, really way to lose on a particular player, to lose a point. 6 blocks in level 2, 2 out of 2 on polls, 3 highlight combination blocks. And he gave him a 0.97 raw score. He gets a subjective adjustment of more than 0.03, which takes him up to 100 for the game. He's the first Ravens lineman this year with an A+, and just an outstanding game at a really clutch time to do this against Seattle. It's not a conference game, but it's a real litmus test of a game, and it says, I think, a lot about how Macari can help you down the stretch with the game he played.
Now, you added in a lot of stuff with some of the other guys, Mustipher, Falele, Cleveland. Anything else you want to add with those guys and how they played in the limited opportunity?
Cleveland had 1 snap earlier in the game as a 6th offensive lineman, but all 3 of them played the last drive alone. And like I said, it was a game where The Seattle defense was quite tired. They all basically were perfect on that drive. I think Cleveland made 8 out of 9, Fa'alele 8 out of 9, and Mustafa 9 out of 9 on the drive. So nobody had a negative event of any sort. So there's not a lot to go on, but it's nice to always pick up a few points here and there when you don't play very often. And nice to see Cleveland get a little bit of playing time at right guard, which is always I like it anytime you can take the starters out because it usually means you're winning big.
Yeah. The last thing here for the O-line, just across the board, your thoughts overall on how they played as a group? I mean, grading teams individually, but there's a lot of things to look at when you look at the entire unit together.
Yeah, terrific game. I mean, a lot of it shows up in the opportunity set they provided Lamar as pass blockers. That's number one, and 50% ATS high watermark for the year, so that's great. The other thing is how many level 2 first contact opportunities did they give the runners? I thought they did a fantastic job of getting Keaton Mitchell going. Yeah, he was caught in the backfield a couple times or caught near the line of scrimmage a couple times. Yeah, I think he had a run for -4, didn't he? And then a pass for -4 in the next play. I think that's right. But anyway, he when he got to level 2, he was able to show that power and burst and elusiveness and contact balance because that offensive line got him those opportunities. And it's going to be very big for them the rest of the season to keep doing that because the Ravens, I think, really have something there, and they need it for Edwards as well. Frankly, you need it for any runner. Whoever you got at running back is you want to get those level 2 first contact opportunities.
Yeah, good stuff from the O-line there. So look, and as a guy that when I look at the O-line, it's really, I know when they've done bad. I always say when I hear your name, that means you've probably done something wrong. But as a group, I thought Sunday was kind of telling with just, it just seemed like will. They were moving guys around and able to do pretty much whatever they wanted as a group. And, like keeping Lamar clean outside of the one play that we talked about with the strip set.
All right, well, great. Well, let's talk about some individual skill position players. And we always do this guest first. You bring up a player, talk about him whatever way you want to. I'll kind of respond, and then I'll bring up my player.
Yeah, I want to talk about Odell a little bit. So he gets in the end zone. I don't know if he's been practicing that touchdown dance for 8 weeks. As I think you pointed out, it was kind of interesting that Tyler Huntley's the guy that throws the touchdown pass to him. Or maybe that was it you today when we were talking about that? That was an interesting thing, and I know Preston brought it up yesterday too when we were talking to him. But yeah, like I still think there's something there. I agree with you that like he's not the player he once was. Ultimately, I had worried about like looking at his route running. I still think that he got some separation in this game, in my opinion, at times. But I had wondered about that. Did you notice anything in separation with him early on in the season that he wasn't getting quite the – because I think that's why we were seeing a lot of flags and maybe not the ball being tossed his way.
Yeah, I think separation has been a problem for him. He's played a lot of snaps so far this season, and the Ravens did a good job of spreading those snaps more in yesterday's game. And there's no need to play Flowers for every snap in a game like this. He's one of the guys who really should be coming out. But a guy like Bateman, who's just starting to hit his stride and really needs the reps, hasn't been getting a lot of targets, he needs to be on the field, likely needs to be on the field. A guy who doesn't need to be on the field is Odell Beckham. I just, he's played a ton of snaps already this year. I kind of feel like we know who he is. I know they wanted to get him a touchdown. I heard one really, I hesitate even to repeat it, but one guy called it a make-a-wish touchdown. Yeah,
I heard that too. And when I read that, I went, oh, that was it stood out to me because I was like, I know it doesn't feel right to say that, right? So, but as you were looking at, I mean, but you felt like they were targeting him, that ball was going to go to him when they got down in the red zone one way or another. He gets his birthday cake after the game. He's a happy guy, and then we move on from him.
Yeah. Well, I know he's a popular play on the team, so I don't really have a problem. Anything they want to scheme up in terms of getting him a touchdown here is fine. I do think the rest of the season that they ought to be trying to give Bateman perhaps 20% of the snaps he's currently getting, in addition to the snaps Bateman would normally get, which would be to me, it would take advantage of what Bateman brings as a route runner. Beckham still needs to be a good teammate to these guys. And I know Beckham is playing for himself in a certain way, but it's very important that Beckham be the kind of route running teacher that he can be. Beckham's one of the great route runners of the last decade in the NFL. And to have him teach Bateman there's, even though Bateman was one of the great route runners coming out of college, it's really his calling card. There's still a lot of tricks that he can teach him. You just see all the penalties Beckham draws, and there's a lot of craftiness as a wide receiver that he can teach to a Bateman.
If you can run routes and if you can really run routes, I mean, look, anybody can go out there and run something. I'm talking crisp. I'm talking when the foot's planted, they don't know if you're going left, right, like all the different things that you can do, the setups for the double moves, depending on what type of receiver you are. I think that route running ultimately is the most important thing, because it's one of the reasons, it's why Hunter Renfrow is still in this league. His ability to run routes from the slot position and what he's done. So I think that it's imperative that you get guys like that, and then you can often teach some of the other things. And once they get comfortable in their route running, then they learn that body control at the NFL level and getting the 2 feet down. Like I was talking about Garrett Wilson last night's game. He didn't get both feet down, but I don't think people realize how impressive it is that he almost did on a play that he had no business doing it by making his body go limp on the sideline. I always thought like AB, Chris Carter, I mean, we can go on and on, Larry Fitzgerald, these guys that had the ability, Randy Moss was great at toe tapping on the sideline and getting that second foot down. We've all done it where we watch a catch and we're going, oh, he didn't get the second foot down. And all of a sudden in slow-mo, you see those little rubber pellets shooting up. You're like, oh my God, he did. He got both feet down. It's pretty impressive. And I still think there's something left in the tank for Odell, but I hope the same thing you do, that he's working with those younger guys and teaching them some of the things he's learned over the years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't know if this is the end for Odell or not. I don't know if there's another stop in his NFL career. I can't see a way he's a Raven next year with all of the UFAs they have to spend money on. But he's in some ways done a part of his job by having Lamar sign here again. Yeah. And in another way, he's cost the Ravens a ton of money for next year, which is that's not his fault for doing that, but it sure sucks.
Just looking at it, especially too, the other thing with this is the DeAndre Hopkins basically becoming available for nothing after the fact, and you just paid $15 million, or you paid that big contract to Odell to bring him in to a short, and then seeing some of the names that became available, and then possibly even available during the trade deadline. Who knows what was floated out there, but teams didn't have the draft capital to go get it.
Yeah. All right, let me bring up a player. I'll leave the big one there, but let's talk about Bateman right away, because he did some things in this game that were a little bit different. Comes back for the football very well. One thing, we talked about route running a little bit when we're talking about Beckham. The Ravens are just starting to get, with their offensive line providing more 3-second pockets, they're starting to get to a point where they can really take advantage of good route running. And, Bateman is a guy who throws wiggle at the top of the route. So that's the important part of that for him. On the other side, Flowers, who's an incredibly sudden athlete, doesn't even need to run routes in a certain sense, because any move he makes, the cornerback overreacts to it, and he's gone anyway in another direction. He can give him a 1-2 very quickly and be gone to an open space on the field. So he almost doesn't really have to know that he's wiggling or manipulate the cornerback in a certain way. Bateman is a manipulator. Beckham is a manipulator if he's going to get separation. So the Ravens offense is finally in a position to take advantage of good route running. This is a time to have Bateman taking over a larger percentage of the snaps, and good comebacks. He has to also occasionally be able to catch a deep ball to make opposing cornerbacks respect the double move that comes with that. But he came out of Minnesota with not only the reputation but the tape to show he can run a very wide variety of routes and be effective with wiggle at the top of that route. And I think he's about ready to explode in that way for the Ravens.
A guy he reminded me of coming out of college, and they went to two different schools, but both good route runners. And I feel like they can actually run the entire route tree. Like, I think there's a lot you can do with Bateman. Was Reggie Wayne, who was drafted at the back end of the first round. And I know I'm comparing him to a guy that's, a Hall of Famer or going to be a Hall of Famer, whatever. But when you look at Reggie Wayne and his accomplishments in this league, like, you could throw him the slant right off the line. You could throw him on the post corner. You could throw the double move. You could throw the hitch route, which Peyton loved throwing that to him. And I think he encompasses all those things. And with his route running ability, he can be that type of player. We just haven't seen it here yet because of injuries, and now there's a lot of mouths to feed. But, ultimately, like, from doing this so long and doing this in the summertime, everybody had that belief that Bateman was going to be the number one receiver, and then it might be Beckham behind him, and we didn't know what we'd get from Zay Flowers right off the bat. But that hasn't been the case thus far. It's been kind of Flowers and then everyone else outside of Andrews, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the important part of it, is making sure that you're getting him the ball and that he's involved in this offense, because I think he's a guy that can't be a home run hitter.
Wayne is an excellent analogy, by the way, or an analog, or whatever the thing is, a comparison. Very much a great route runner, and the Colts love those guys. And there's good reason, because Peyton Manning was very much a time is running off in my head kind of quarterback who was always going to make his play from the pocket. In fact, in his last years, he almost never left the pocket, almost never scrambled at all. But he always had a great internal clock for knowing where a receiver is going to be. Didn't even have to have his back turned. He could have his back turned to the field for play action at the time, and then he'd turn around and the ball would be right where it's supposed to be. But to do that, you really have to have receivers who know how to wiggle, get free, and be in the spot that Peyton expects them to be on time. And that takes great route running. And the Colts had a bunch of those guys. Marvin Harrison really fits into the same category, but you bring up other guys, even like Zach Pascal and some of the other guys the Colts have had since the Manning era have been pretty good route runners that can throw a little shake at the top of the route and lose a corner. So it's a great analogy, and there's a great reason why. I'm not sure yet that Lamar really is ideal for working with great route runners, because he just does not. He's not an on schedule quarterback. He extends very naturally. He looks and he sees, and he's not a bad. He's improved his read rate, but I don't think he's a natural fake one, fake two, throw here guy automatically that has that timing built into his head, especially when he doesn't have he's not looking directly at the action happening.
I love what you said right there, because like that's something that I don't think a lot of people think about when you think about what timing routes are in the NFL. You want to know where a guy's going to be. With good route runners, you have an idea of where they're going to be, and it helps you in that ball placement. Whereas Lamar has been a guy that, even though the completion percentage is up, I do think he needs to be a little bit more accurate towards the receiver. Like if you throw a pass and it's caught for 8 yards, if you threw it in front of him and he caught it without having to turn back and catch it, could that have been one he turned up the field for an extra 3 or 4? Maybe take it to the house, maybe, whatever it could be. I do think some of those things are imperative that we look at, but you'll find out over time the type of quarterback he's going to be. I think Zay's the perfect guy to work with him. And when you were talking about route running, it's so true, because it has to be precise. It's almost like a pitcher. It has to look the same way every time, because when I want to run the in instead of the out, I want it to look exactly the same way. Or if I'm going to do the double move and I'm running the out, now I want to be able to turn it up. Or, in anything, a wheel route, make it look like it's a little bit different as you're sneaking out and then you're taking off. So, but they do have the talent here to do a lot of different things in this passing game.
Yeah. All right, I think it's your turn again.
Oh, it's my turn to throw out a player. Well, let's go, since we're obviously on the offense. Let's talk about big Mark Andrews and what he's been doing. You look at a player that I think he's so important to this offense, even when he's not getting in the end zone, but a guy that should be getting attention. And again, with all the mouths that we talked about they have to feed, it's not like if I were going to take away one thing from the Ravens, it's probably the run game. If we got away from the run game and looked at the pass, I'd want to take away Mark Andrews. Well, maybe that's not the case anymore when you watch Zay Flowers. So you really have to figure out and kind of disguise some coverages against him if you want to double him. But he's just been an absolute monster for this team and one of the best tight ends in the league. And I don't think he gets enough praise for his blocking.
Yeah, I probably not. Caught 9 of 10 balls in this game, and he has not been the yards per target threat he was early in his career. It's a natural consequence of getting more targets. Is you get more marginal targets, more contested targets, more that are not as good. And the great thing about it is Lamar has not been throwing tons of interceptions in Andrews' directions. I have to really look that up for this year, but he had 9 a couple of years ago throwing to Andrews, and the targets have just gotten way out of range. Well, this year it's a lot more to Flowers. There's some target share for Beckham going out. Now we're starting to see a little bit of target share for Bateman coming back, and we're finally probably at a better spot where a higher percentage of Andrews' targets are going to be good targets. And when he sits down in space, there's nobody like him in terms of being able to work with it. Great after the catch. I don't think I could have projected anything better for him, even seeing his first year and how great that was, because he set the all-time Ravens records for yards per target in his first year in 2018. With 11.04. And I still wouldn't have projected anything better than what's happened since for him. He's increased his volume tremendously. He's been Lamar's go-to guy. And, in knowing that, you have to project a lower yards per target for him.
I'm actually, I think he's a little bit better after the catch than we give him credit for, too. It always feels like, if he gets time to turn and assess the field, that he's jumping over somebody, making somebody miss, running through them, and falling forward for an extra couple of yards.
Yeah, I'd say Todd Heap did a lot of that hurdling, and I think his net hurdling really hurt him. Mark Andrews is a safer player with the football after the catch here. Yeah. Okay. Talk briefly. Well, let's talk about Mitchell. Keaton Mitchell, just a great game. We talked a little bit about this during the first show. We haven't really talked about him in the second, but one of the greatest ever yards number for 9 or fewer carries. So I went to StatHead. Of course, I was trying all kinds of different searches for Mitchell in terms of what it does. And the really frustrating one that I can't seem to get is the first 9 carries of somebody's career. What's the most yards ever accumulated? I'm guessing he's probably it, but I don't know if Pro Football Reference has the ability to do that on their StatHead function. But what I did do is I looked at the greatest games ever with 9 or fewer carries. And one thing is funny about it is he's tied for the 9th ever with 138 yards. Maurice Jones-Drew had the most ever. It was an 8-carry game that he had 170 or so yards on. But Colin Kaepernick is in the group. And one guy who's only 3 yards behind is Josh Allen, who had a 9-carry, 135-yard game. Yeah. So
some big quarterback runs there.
Yeah, it's a really interesting list because the top 20 contains 5 guys whose position no longer exists under the same name in NFL. So
really?
2 guys were LHs, 2 guys were RHs. I assume that's a left halfback, a right halfback. It probably deals with old box formations or something. But and one was a WB, which I assume is a wingback and not a wishbone or something like that. Yeah. So
I guess in the old double wing and all the different positions that you'd have in that one and single wing. I mean, there's a lot of ways to look at it. I mean, that's just some old school football or high school and college football. But yeah, when you talk about Keaton Mitchell, I love the explosiveness. I loved how you talked about him making guys miss. And again, it's that, I always felt like they needed, when they had all those injuries and they went to all these old veteran running backs, I was like, man, this isn't what you want. You really hope there's some young guy on your team that just kind of gets it and you get to give him an opportunity. It felt like Kansas City always had one of those guys on their team they would just throw in and he'd run for him, or the old Denver scheme where it's like, oh yeah, here's Orlando Scary. You like him? Oh no, you don't like him? Well here's Mike Anderson, or here's whoever. It's kind of funny to think back about some of these guys that have been given opportunities, and now it's exciting to think that Keaton, with this opportunity here that he was finally given and he made the most of it, that he could get more carries and maybe become an integral part of this offense.
Well, there's one guy watching this game who probably is not too happy with the circumstances. And I'm sure he's rooting for the Ravens, and he'll get a ring if they win. But J.K. Dobbins is not very likely to be in Baltimore next year. And it became less likely with this game because the 2 guys who are signed for 2024 are Hill and Mitchell, and they're both going to be here for sure. I think the Ravens would likely go to a power back, but if you're cutback speed guy, your speed guy, your cutback guy could be different players, of course. But in Mitchell's case, I think he gives you a lot of what Dobbins gives you as a runner, and what they would want to complement that is more of a pure power runner like Edwards that they could go out and get, and those guys are available at the college level. They can bring in somebody new, or they can re-sign Edwards. But I just don't see Dobbins now being re-signed by the Ravens, even though he could come back at a bargain price.
Yeah, it just makes you wonder what could have been for him. The injury is just too much. And I think he was unbelievably talented. I was excited for this year. But, and there were some other things too. Like I thought Harbaugh took a couple of shots at JK in praising Keaton in the post-game presser a little bit.
I didn't even hear that.
He brought up the word humble a couple of times. Like he's very, very humble. He's very humble. And to me, it felt like he was taking a shot at JK. I don't have any inside knowledge on that, but that's what it felt like. And some of the people I've talked to felt the same way. But we'll see. We'll see. It's kind of tough because he wanted to get paid. And I understand it from a running back standpoint. And I'm sure you do too. It just sucks where it's at for him. But this is the game now. Like I wouldn't pay a running back that type of money for a long-term deal.
Yeah, he's got his own union to blame in terms of the CBA that was negotiated and whatnot. One of the things about this is I think the owners are legitimately agnostic to where the revenue goes. They don't really care if it goes to rookies, if it goes to more veteran players. They don't really care if it goes to running backs, wide receivers, or offensive linemen. But they're gonna play where they think the rules benefit, paying those players. In the terms of running backs, it's not anything about the usage of a running back that is minimized in terms of their value on the field, because you can build a running back into your offense a lot of different ways and get value from them. It's durability that is the big issue. So if you have a fixed point at which players come off their rookie deals, they're already ready for the old folks home. And any other position, they're the offensive line, defensive line, they're often just getting started.
Well, we weren't that far off from and I tell you to take, and this is how it worked out for me, because I was a big Ezekiel Elliott truther. I thought he was the best all around back in the league. And when he hit the wall, and I'm watching it, and I'm seeing Tony Pollard run better than him, and me being a Zeke truther, I'm going with this. Yeah, I think you got to move on from him. It's sad, because he was a great talent, but now when you watch him, there's just not much there. The explosiveness leaves. I think maybe you're running more upright. You tend to get hurt a little bit more, and you have these nagging injuries. And it's the right benchmark, 30. I wouldn't want to sign a running back on more than a 1-year deal unless I needed a backup or something else, a bet. After the age of 30, I just wouldn't.
Well, you look at all the deals that the Ravens have had for guys that were trying to make a comeback, with Devonta Freeman and Le'Veon Bell and Kenyon Drake and Josh Gordon, who's not been terrible, but Latavius Murray, a bunch of guys coming back that basically have not worked out. And I think the thought was that those guys could work better with the mesh point, and there was something about the experience with them that was going to make them a better risk than younger backs. But I've much more appreciated when the Ravens have gone over the young guys who are cast-offs, maybe attitude problems somewhere else. I mean, Alex Collins comes to mind as a guy who was in that boat. It's not like they've never got an old back works out. We go back to Justin Forsett. He was an old back who worked out, and Mark Ingram was. But they were both signed to pretty limited deals in terms of what they got. And, it's just their hit rate on older running backs is clearly not good. And every time I see them sign a 28, 29-year-old running back, I'm like, again.
Yeah. Can we throw another player?
Sure.
What about Pat Ricard? We saw his snaps down a little bit. Do you expect to see less and less of him in this offense as it moves forward, or is he going to be an integral part of what they do if they're going to make a run to the Super Bowl?
Well, it's an interesting question, because this is a game that I thought would have suited Ricard very well. They ran the ball 41 times. They were closing out the game. That's why I said you have to have Ricard on the roster. I do expect to see him more and not less, probably, in terms of how they do him. They used him a few times as a chip blocker in this game, where he gives you some real value to help out your tackles. They used him once as a set blocker. So he had some pass blocking contributions he made as well. He did was used in the pattern 3 times. One of the things that is a little funny about the entire Pat Ricard situation is, I think these players at the beginning of the year that the Ravens fans are really happy to pay the money to, Rock Ya-Sin. I can think of others, Beckham, Aguilar. Nobody really seemed to mind the draft capital lost on him, and they were, they might have had questions about him as a receiver, but they weren't really concerned about the 6th round pick. But you go through the guys they paid money to, players don't become too concerned about that. For some reason, Ricard is a hill people want to die on, either the white or black, the 1 or 0 hill on. And,
love or hate him. Yeah,
they love him or hate him. And the truth of the matter is, he's incredibly useful to Monken's offense. Not as much perhaps as he was to Roman's offense, is not as integral, but the Ravens need him. And I think right now, he's still signed for another year, because people have kind of forgotten that. But I think he'll be here next year. I
like him a lot. Like, again, I'm not the guy out here screaming, give him the ball in the short yardage situations. Oh, he's so big, he's just got to fall forward. That's not me with the talent they have at back. I'm also not the guy that's going to sit here and tell you that take him off the field. I think he's very important. Seeing what he's doing at that size with that ability, it's impressive. And no matter what, if you're sitting there saying all you have to do is follow Patrick Ricard, that's where the ball's going. Well, good luck with that. That's easier said than done.
Yeah, $4 million for next year, Ricard will make. And even though the Ravens are tight on money, I think they'll start by going back to him and saying, "Hey, do you want to play for 3 or do you want to extend and go 2 for 6 kind of thing?" But I think it's a very good chance he stays in Baltimore, and still a very productive blocker and very important. And Keaton Mitchell's future, in part, is going to be determined by a player like Ricard or somebody else who's trying to take his place. How about we talk briefly about Likely, who got back in the offense with 4 targets, 4 catches. He's actually only not caught 1 ball all year that's been thrown his way. And that was that horrible drop in the Colts game, which is one of, 10 plays that probably cost them that game. They had a lot of different opportunities, a lot of individual plays in a 1-score game. But, as a gambler, that's where all that drama comes from, right?
Yeah, that's where he went down to 1 knee, right, and tried to catch that and dropped it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, there's been some bad ones in the league this year as far as drops, and you look at receivers and you're going, man, what did you see there? What happened? Did you take your eye off of it? But that Colts game and that Steelers game still stand out in my mind going, what happened? What is going on with this team? But now it seems like, figuring some things out. I do like I'd like to see more of Likely, but at what extent too, because I do like the wide receivers that they've been mixing in. I thought before they made all those acquisitions of the wide receivers they're getting, we might see more double tight sets, and likely maybe you could see an offense similar to what we've seen in New England or even here in years past with the double tights. But yeah, it's been not as much of them as I thought. I still think he's a red zone target and can be used so as such, but it's a nice little luxury to have if something should happen to Mark Andrews. Knock on wood that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's very important depth for that, and at least he's had a reasonably good season as a receiver when he's been targeted. He hasn't been targeted enough for my liking, but one of the things Monken said during an interview during camp was, I can scheme some, and I'm paraphrasing slightly how he responded to the question, but I can scheme to get the ball distributed to a little bit, but there's also in any sport, the guy who's distributing the ball, point guard or whatever, is going to distribute it to the shooter who's shooting well. And so it's incumbent on the players who are getting opportunities to make the most of those opportunities when they come up, and that's how they earn more and whatnot. But I think it's a very honest point in terms of that. But on the other hand, Monken can do some things with scheme to get players 1 target and get them a chance to earn some additional trust dollars in the Lamar bank account that will hopefully get some additional targets. I think he's done a pretty good job, by the way, with Bateman the last few games doing exactly that.
Yeah, rookie or free agent, whenever you come into a new team, if you're dropping the ball early from the quarterback, make no mistake about it. Like, there are some guys that will come back to you and give you a chance, but they know what the task at hand and what they're trying to do. You drop a pass, it's very catchable. You may not get that look again, being, again, a rookie or a free agent until you've developed that rapport with the quarterback.
Now, I don't know what the relationship was between Joe Flacco and one particular receiver I'm going to mention here, but if Tandon Doss did not have pictures of Joe Flacco with some other woman or in some strip club or whatever, I don't know how he got as many targets as he did. But Flacco would continually go to him.
Well, you know the story there with Flacco picked him when they asked him who they wanted him to draft, and he said Tandon Doss.
I didn't know that. Really?
Yeah, that was out of Indiana, right? Tandon Doss, if I remember correctly.
We'll have to look it up.
I think so. But they, the story was that they asked Flacco which wide receiver he liked, and he said he liked Tandon Doss. So whether that's true or not, it's just something to think about. But Tandon Doss, man, I haven't heard that name in years.
55 targets, 26 receptions career. And actually not a terrible yards per target at 7.8. There's been a lot of Ravens receivers that have been worse than that. But
I'm trying to remember the little receiver out of Utah that they had. Is it Mike something? Slot receiver that they no, not Campanaro. He went to Utah. This was years ago.
Flacco era, Bowler era. When are we talking?
I think it may have crossed over Bowler into Flacco. I thought his name was Mike something, wide receiver out of Utah that they drafted, but I had high hopes for him, and he never panned out. I think always injured. Now I can't remember his last name, but
it was Marcus Smith, but that's not who you mean. It's because he never had a catch for the Ravens, but he drew a huge penalty. Yep.
Here, I'm going to look it up. Ravens receiver.
All right.
Anyway.
I did set up MVPs 3-1. I don't know if you want to like get that ready to go, and I'll pull up some mailbag questions here.
Sure.
We'll do those, and then we'll do the MVPs. Let's jump right over here. We had some good ones here. Okay, here's a good one. This is from Jeff B, and he has a whole lot of numbers after that, but I won't go through that. Linderbaum's had a big step forward as a pass blocker. I'm sorry, I got to go back to his question. This is my response to him. Will you do a midseason review? I especially want to see this for the OL. Mostly I want to see if you still have reservations about Linderbaum's ability in pass pro and limitations due to arm length. Okay, so Jeff, I said I would get through this, and I think I've answered a lot of this during the offensive line review in this episode, but Linderbaum's improvement as a pass blocker is one of the really stark improvements on the season, and one of the reasons it's kind of hidden from fans is the fact that the PFF combination of aggregating grades it just doesn't work. So what I'd say is look at the pass blocking initially, and you'll see how much he's improved. I was very happy with where Linderbaum started as a rookie, as a C plus player. It was a solid year in terms of anybody's rookie year in the NFL. I was never buying into the notion that he was an instant Pro Bowler or something by his run blocking alone, which was very good. This year, he's actually taken a step back in run blocking. Probably a little bit of that is regression to being normal. Some of it also is probably that he picked up weight to be a better pass blocker. So that's worked out. And I think his year is perhaps more exceptional by the fact that he does not have nearly as good a left guard playing next to him as he did with Powers. Powers, a very good pass blocker. I think he probably helped out Linderbaum some as a rookie. This year, less so from Simpson. And I think his improvement is really stark in terms of what he's done as a pass blocker. And I don't think you could ask for more of a improvement between year one and year two.
So you still go back to the move that they made, great move to acquire the first round pick, get Linderbaum.
That was a fantastic trade. I mean, in terms of the value acquired for Marquise Brown. Does you think anybody in Baltimore really misses Marquise Brown right now?
No, but people were upset because you after the fact now knowing what you got, but once they trade him, it's like, well, who's going to play wide receiver? And you've got this situation, you just gave him away, and now you're taking a center. Oh my God, a center! Wow, it's the unsexy picks that people don't realize really matter to the success of these teams.
Yeah, I actually wanted them to take a corner there. And they, get a center later because there's a lot of guys who had center. But the center I wanted was Zach Tom, and he didn't go till the 5th round. And the corner I wanted though was Kaiir Elam. So if they drafted him, he's really sucked he's been as bad as Jalen Armour-Davis, frankly.
Really?
But Zach Tom has been fantastic, and he's played tackle for the Packers now and is really playing very well. So you give, you get in terms of that. Let's see. Okay, here's a good one. Garnett West, friend of the show, at Garnett478, Semper Fi, a longtime Marine there. What is your opinion now when it comes to the bootleg with Jackson turning his back on the defense after witnessing it for half a season? Okay, so this is a comment I made in the past about Jackson having difficulty reacquiring the field. He's had some good boots. There's no doubt about it. I think that Monken has probably provided a little better boot scheme for Lamar because most of what they did on the boot with Roman was zone block left, naked boot right. We even have ZBL NBR. It goes immediately on our score sheet when we see this play developed. And it's so common that what it means is the right-handed quarterback rolling to the right is the natural side to them to throw from. Rolling to the left, much harder. So while you do sometimes see zone block right, naked boot left, it's much rarer. But the play is so well understood in terms of what the dance steps are. The defenses recognize it too. The Ravens have an additional component that backside edge defender is too much on Lamar as a mobile quarterback. If you had Joe Flacco doing that boot, you succeed a higher percentage of the time because Joe Flacco is not a real big threat to leave the pocket. But that backside edge defender knows I'm responsible for Lamar. And that thing, in the same way that Homer Simpson is always thinking, eat the pudding, eat the pudding, eat the pudding.
Yeah.
He can't get that out of his head. So when the guy rolls right, he's right on him. So
that's good stuff. Yeah. I mean, I like hearing the breakdown of those things too with, the different types of quarterbacks we're seeing now in the league, where you're going to get more quarterbacks plays designed to roll the pocket at times. But ultimately, I think teams are hoping that you stay in that pocket and make some plays eventually. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting take to kind of hear some of those things and how things work out.
Anyway, I will finish the point here real quickly is that the boot they ran in the last game, they didn't try and do a zone block play. They made it look like a gap play, and he rolled out, and it looked like he got an extra split second to throw that bar to Lamar. And I know Sip to Tally Films, Coach Evans, by the way, great material there from Coach. We want to have him back on this show when we get an opportunity, but he puts out some great videos himself. Pointed out that the spacing was not great, and I think that's part of the way the play kind of worked after I thought about it a little bit is they're so used to normal spacing being at 3 levels on the boot play that when you show them something different and a gap run scheme, what looks like a gap run in front of that, then it makes the boot not look, it's not as, that edge defender is not as keyed up for the boot. I think he got a little extra time. I think the ball went to Mark Andrews on the play for, 8 or 10 yard gain. It was a nice little play that worked out. But yeah, Garnett, to just answer your question, I think the scheme has done more for Lamar this year in terms of boot plays.
By the way, it was David Reed was the wide receiver out of Utah.
Oh, there you go.
Played with Flacco. He was drafted the year after Flacco was drafted, I believe, if I had my years correct. But that was the name I was thinking of. I couldn't think of the name, but yeah, that's the guy.
So David Reed hardly was on the field at all, but one of his things in the 2011 game at the Steelers when they came back to win on Torrey Smith's catch, where Torrey Smith, didn't drop it, but he didn't make a catch on the left side of the end zone. Then he caught it, of course, with 8 seconds left or whatever it was to win the game. David Reed, I think, got the opportunity before that. Flacco threw one into the end zone for him that was just overthrown and, unfortunate. But he got some big opportunities for the Ravens for what he did on the field as a receiver.
Well, that's what I was saying. Like, I thought he was one of those guys that kind of got thrust into a situation and would have had opportunities had he played well, and the numbers weren't there.
Look at how many targets he had as for the Ravens. He's mostly a kick returner. He had 12 total targets in his Ravens career. I'm sorry, 9 total targets in his Ravens career. So that 2011 target I'm talking about in the end zone was either the second or third target of his entire career with the Ravens.
Wow.
So.
And by the way, he was in the draft with Sergio Kindle, Terrence Cody,
that was
Ed Dixon, Dennis Pitta, Arthur Jones, and Ramon Harewood.
Yeah. It's a really bad draft, honestly. But you don't have 100% no matter who you are. All right. We ready to talk about some MVPs here?
Sure.
Let's do it. We'll go 3-1. And since it will be less likely that I'll steal your guy, you go ahead with your number 3 guy.
My number 3, we're just talking Ravens here, right?
Yep. Ravens and offense only, not defense.
Yes, of course. So my number 3, I put it in, and I'm going to give it to Gus because I think Gus has been inherently important to the offense. The getting in the end zone. And again, if you're looking at it, or if we're just going from this game, there would be some easy ones to pick. But again, I think Gus has been inherently important to the offense and having a nose for the end zone. We want to look back at this game. It was important.
Wouldn't disagree with that, not even for a second. That's a great pick. My number 3 guy is Lamar. And this was not Lamar's greatest game throwing the ball. He still had the high completion percentage. Didn't make the most out of his opportunity set, but what he did do for the first time in a few weeks was really run the ball effectively. And that was nice to see. I thought Seattle was not good at keeping him in the pocket. They didn't spy him effectively in this game, so it ended up with him getting free and having some key runs in this game, even when they got pressure occasionally. So Boye Mafe was chasing him all the way down the field on one of those, and it was nice to see. But he's my number 3 guy this week.
My number 2, I know you won't have him. I'm going to give it to Odell Beckham. Finally getting into the end zone. He had that dance ready. God knows he's been practicing every night before the game. But look, we get past that now, right? He finally got his touchdown on his birthday. It's great. I thought overall, though, going from last game where it feels like I'm sure he doesn't feel like he's contributing, making a play and getting in the end zone helped him out. So I'll give it to Odell.
Okay, fair enough. My number 2 guy is Patrick McCary, first A+ for any lineman. Actually, very tough choice between him and the number 1 guy, who I guess we can both probably guess we have the same guy.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's kind of tough to get away from him, and he wowed everyone. But Keaton Mitchell has to be the guy. And you know me, I can't give an MVP to an offensive lineman. If I didn't hear your name, thanks a lot. But for me, it's all skill position players. I just love the way he ran the football. And on top of it, like, I just think it's such a great story, and knowing that Dad was there and hearing about the family and all these things. And once I find that text chain, I'll make sure I send it to you. But he was just incredible. And I'm sure you can talk to just breaking it down of what he actually looked like, the missed tackles and everything else. I'm just talking visually. It was pretty stunning to see the long 60-yarder and then that 40-yard touchdown line.
All right. Well, I'll tell you, not just for Keaton, and this is his time. Keaton is going to be a tremendous part of this Ravens team for a long time. Anthony Mitchell, his career a little bit less known, but he was a hell of a ball player, great dime back for the Ravens the season after the Super Bowl in 2001 and also in 2002 again. He played some great football for the Ravens. I think he actually was a starting safety in 2002, but a dime back in 2001. Still want to talk to him on the show about the long touchdown return and that play and the experience that he had in Tennessee, because it was one of my best days ever as a fan, and certainly the best until the Mile High Miracle came along. But outrageous play, and it looks like I'm sure you're very proud right now if you're out there and with what your son is doing.
Ken, you keep bringing up that Mile High Miracle like it means the same thing to me as it does to you. Now, I'm a Peyton Manning guy, so I had different. I was pulling for the Ravens once they won that game, but I just wanted to see Peyton win another one, and he eventually got there, but he didn't look like himself. He looked like old noodle arm at that point in time.
That's exactly who he was. Even in that 2012 game, in the playoffs, they had all the things about him dipping his hand in an ice bucket to prepare for that game, but he didn't look like he had much on the football.
No, there was no zip.
All right. Outstanding. Jeremy, just a pleasure to talk football with you. Thank you for spending a couple hours with me. Tell folks where they can find your website and talk football online.
Yeah, my website's concretelocks.com. It's 2 N's. My gambling website, we sell picks, again, under 30 cents a day. Check it out. You can cancel at any time if you want to try it out. I give out free picks, and I also have YouTube podcast that I do on a daily basis on gambling. You can just search Concrete Locks and it'll pop up, or check on my Twitter feed at JCon Sports. Appreciate you having me, Ken. Like I said, anytime you need me, man, I love talking this, love chopping it up with you. It's been a lot of fun.
Okay, absolutely love it. I will take you up on that. Other folks out there who would like to be on a Film Study short, hit me up. DMs are always open on Twitter. You know the rules by this point, and please hit me up with a nice short topic, and I'll get back to you very quickly to talk about the possibility of that being a show. Jeremy, thanks again for coming on.
Anytime.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.